Hello, and welcome to Shop Talk Live. On today's panel, we have Scott and Ann. Scott's the principal and founder of Blue Ananta. Retailer David Sands, who's the founder of David's Kitchen. And Dev Dillon, who's an industry specialist in convenience retail. Over to you, Dan.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Shop Talk Live every Friday, 2 p.m. UK time. And as usual, I'd like to give a very warm welcome to our international audience. We actually started Shop Talk Live 37 days ago. Feels like a lifetime. But a lot's happened since then. And 45 countries have tuned in, are now tuning in, or have tuned in over that period since we started Shop Talk Live. So thank you for continuing to do that. And we have a very interesting discussion for you today. I'd like to welcome back Scott, Annan, and Dev Dillon, and David Sands. I'd like to welcome you to Shop Talk. So Scott, this is the band's second album. What's the second album going to look like?
Well, it was namaste, everyone. It was a challenge I gave to Dev. I said, I thought Led Zeppelin 1 was brilliant when it came out, and we needed a Led Zeppelin 2. So what we've tried to do here, Dan, is everyone, all retailers that I speak to, UK, Ireland, Hong Kong, China, Japan, South Africa, are all talking about how are we going to operate, what we actually going to do. So Dev and I, with help from David and a couple of other folks like Depayan in India, said, let's do an open source report and try and give people some guidance into operating in what is the new reality.
We've obviously put the report out as a pre-read, and what I encourage the audience to do is, if you have read it and have questions which are pertaining to what you've read, keep those start those coming in straight away, and we'll take those earlier than usual on the basis that the report has been a very interesting read, and you may have sort of got some immediate feedbacks. But I think it's a hugely impressive, detailed report. And Dev, I mean, you've constructed a lot of this report yourself, haven't you, as well?
Yeah, and I think, Dan, it was interesting actually. It's me and Frank Beard, we exchanged a few messages on Twitter. I think we were both feeling slightly overwhelmed with the amount of commentary that was coming out on retail, to the point where it stopped being helpful. And I'm responsible for a business that has restaurants, franchise brands, convenience stores and cafes, and to make the right business decisions with this plethora of noise was proving to be quite difficult. So we really wanted to shift the conversation towards actions. So one of the sections is very clearly the non-negotiables that you needed to have delivered to have just navigated through the first few phases. And then, as Scott mentioned, really what the medium to long-term actions are as a retailer that you need to now prepare for as the adrenaline begins to subside.
Now, David, thanks, Dev. David, I know you made some important contributions to this second report as well. How do you view it as a retailer?
Well, good afternoon. We think this is a really important report. It's very clear over the last 3 months, our business has changed, and we're seeing signs that potentially we could be a completely different business going forward. And for me, one of the great learnings from this, and I should know this already, but the learning is simply that small businesses such as ours are able to change very, very quickly. And this is one of these pivotal moments where we have changed, we will change, and we will continue to change. And therefore, the reports come out at a really important time because it helps shape our future strategy.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Let's get into the report then and just begin to sort of evaluate what's in it and what some of the key points are, because there's a lot to it. Starting with government, I put this point as government suddenly in many countries, almost all countries, matters more, doesn't it? As you point out in the report. How does that impact on our industry? Maybe start with you, Dev.
Massively, Dan. I think governments are responsible for enforcing the phases of lockdown and the restrictions on human being movement that are associated with them. And I think we should expect that the phases of lockdown might change and adapt throughout the year. I know various different health systems around the world are talking about winter, where you've got the combination of the common flu, norovirus and coronavirus. That might mean that lockdown perhaps picks up again to a slightly higher stage. And if we think about how the report outlines the landscape for retailers and how they change during each of those different phases, the challenges that are presented and the opportunities are really different in each phase. And I just think back to those early days of full lockdown and what it meant for retail sales, the supply chain, and operations. So how government flips between the different levers of lockdown has massive revenue implications for us. I think there's a more general point here, Dan, though, is that I think this is the start of much greater interventions from government on areas that affect us all, whether that's workplace safety, consumer safety, hygiene, health and well-being. I think government will be playing catch up for quite a while, trying to unpick where they need to use policy in particular to help us set the new norms as such.
I felt the grid that showed the phases of lockdown was really useful, and I was also intrigued by how precise you guys have been in terms of looking at the industry impacts between the different phases. Scott and then David, perhaps you could comment a bit on that, on those particular points.
Well, the exactness of the detail, Dan, came from, to be fair, David and his other colleagues in the Independent Retailer Owners Forum, who pivoted, adapted, some overnight, to do these things. So whether it was put in home delivery in 3 days, curbside pickup, David and his fantastic, make your pizzas at home. So all of those things came about by people adapting very quickly. Our national retailers also, I think I've said before, were heroes. They employed a lot of people from industries that were furloughed, food service. Tesco's up to 1.2 million deliveries a week. These are fundamental changes that they haven't come around because of COVID-19. They've come around because of what the government has done, in their view, to combat COVID-19. So there is a big human economic element here, and I'm with Dev. Some of this will stay. Some of it will come back, and hopefully we'll talk about it later. A lot of it will go. But the key thing is retailers, as David said, are now ready. Perhaps we weren't ready before, we were just running. Now we know where we're running to and where we may have to run to in the future.
David, perhaps you'd like to follow on and comment on that.
Well, I mean, it's the question of government. I mean, I've spent my life trying to avoid government interference and get on with my business. But we can't do that on this occasion. The government have stepped in, perhaps in a state of panic, to introduce lockdown. A third of the world has been in some form of lockdown. And, our business is based in Scotland, and we have a different lockdown policy to the rest of the UK even. It looks like we may end up having one of the longest lockdowns in the world. And so the phases, we think we know where we are going, but the problem we have is, or the challenge we have, is that government are quite vague as to when things are going to be allowed. I have absolutely no idea in Scotland when hotels and restaurants and everything else are going to open. And if I don't know that has implications for how we're going to operate our business in the short term. But in the long term, there's no question that this has accelerated changes in consumer behaviour that were already there, but I think it's going to accelerate them now.
And just to build on David's point, I think if for retailers to have a very, very simple set of questions to help them navigate through these phases, I think there's two that come to mind. One is, what are customers allowed to do? And the second is, what do customers want to do? What they're allowed to do is going to be pretty easy to find out, because it will come through government policy and document. What they want to do is the difficult one. That's the bit that we're all trying to build, sales platforms and ideas around, is what do customers actually want to do and how they're feeling.
No, 100%. I mean, the other thing I was going to pick up, which I thought you'd made a really good point in the report on, was really how we're not necessarily going to go from 5 to 4 to 3 to, if you like, we're going to be moving back to previous phases, probably over the next year. There's going to be some, so in other words, it's not just a question of planning for what, for a phased unwinding of the lockdown. It's a question of planning for that, but also planning for the eventuality that you might go back to a full-on lockdown at some time in the future. So flexibility is absolutely key, isn't it, Scott?
Yeah, yes, it is, Dan, and we put it in because David said it, governments have taken a lot more control. So we don't know what they plan to do, but if one looks at other markets, a couple of European markets, the economic scientists are making a little bit more noise than the epidemiological, that's a big word, scientists. So the comment coming out is, we can't afford to do this, which means business then has to run. So I am of the view that we are unlikely to return back to the harder lockdown stages, but retailers need to know that governments can make these decisions and they need to be ready to do it. So have your online, your curbside pickup, your scan, pay and go, have all of these things ready. Hopefully like social distancing, they're all going to go away and we won't have to use them, but David said it, it's no longer the business person's decision. A government is now deciding.
I think, Dan, as well, based upon the latest approaches from nations that are slightly further down the journey, we should also, particularly where we've got national retailers, prepare for regional lockdowns as well. So we might have one area which has much higher levels of containment. What that means for retail within that area, we're unsure of yet, but that adds some further complications to it as well.
Well, I'd like to bring up strategy, or if you like, medium-term strategy as the next point. But just before we do that, let's just stay on food service and hospitality. And just to, I think, to make your point, Switzerland, restaurants are open, but they've only got 30% of the business that they had this time last year. So many of them have closed again. So to your point, guys, about the consumer needing to want to go back as well as being allowed to go back, this is a key issue. And so the question I wanted to ask you was, can we even achieve 50% in food service and hospitality in the first year?
Well,
David, start with that, Dan?
Yeah.
I mean, if you base it on the results from countries that have released lockdowns early, and also the extensive amount of customer surveys that are taking place around the world, then for the traditional sit-down restaurant, bar and pub industries, it isn't going to be a happy time in 2020. And I think there is a genuine risk that some of those sub-industries and industries are at risk of collapse if they don't have significant government and policy intervention to get them through the next 18 months. That's generally the narrative that's coming out from those traditional industries. I think for me, though, food service is something that I'm generally more optimistic about. And I look at how the quick service restaurant chains have adapted so brilliantly, and their businesses are now absolutely set up for takeaway. And they've been using technology, either existing platforms or rapidly developing new platforms to facilitate click and collect. and they are reaping those benefits already when you look at reopenings around the world. I think for food to go in convenience in particular, I think the demand is still there, if not more so, because more people are working from home. But we're going to have to completely rethink the way that we sell those products. And I think we're a little bit slow off the block, to be honest, to be able to, we've got to learn from the quick service restaurant operators. We've got to embrace things like drive-through, as a format, which will rapidly expand, I think, over the next 18 months. But that's an area I think we should expect that food to go and food convenience, the demand is there, but we can't rest on our laurels. We've got to do something about it to give customers confidence to buy those products again in our stores.
Great points. David, do you want to come in on that as well?
Yeah, I think the issue, Dan, is that the British public have been subjected to a constant message about staying at home, save lives, save the NHS. And looking at recent surveys in Scotland, there was something like 82% of people in Scotland believe that the lockdown should be gradual. And so I think a lot of our customers are quite scared, actually, to go out. And the idea of sitting in a restaurant or going into a busy bar won't appeal to them. However, what I can say in our own business, our takeaway business collapsed. Week one, it just didn't exist. Our sit-down business obviously disappeared as well. But what I can tell you now is our takeaway business is busier than ever. So that has come back, partly because a lot of our competitors are still closed, but nevertheless, it's people are coming out, they are taking away food, and I think takeaway operators, however they do it, I think they will be the first to regain sales.
Absolutely. Now, we've heard a lot, when we did the last session, we heard a lot about immediate responses, crisis responses, and David, you've just explained, a little bit of that, the story as far as your business was concerned. Is it time, I mean, again, this is something I think the report pulls out, but is it time for a medium-term strategy? Is it time to look up and look longer term and step out of the immediate here and now for a second, David, and take a longer term view? Do you think that's something that your business, other businesses are now ready to do?
I think this is one of these pivotal moments in our industry. I really do. And I think, we've been thinking, I mean, we've seen a lot of things emerge that were slowly happening anyway, but they've rapidly turned on. I was skeptical about delivery. Scott has been talking about delivery a long time. We turned on a delivery operation within 2 days. It's grown arms and legs now. It's a difficult thing to manage. And quite clearly, what we're going to do is develop the digital capability to make that operation smoother. That's going to exist. That's going to carry on, and as well as online as well. So I think businesses, in the convenience sector, if they imagine somehow that business is going to return to normal, and this is a little bit, a 3-month boost, and then, it'll be back to normal, I'm not sure I agree with that. I think we've got a real opportunity here. People are trying our stores for the first time. They kind of like what we're doing. They see things like local suppliers. In our case, we make a lot of products that we sell, so they're kind of interested in that. They've never seen that before. And I think engaging with our customers through social media, I've never seen that more important than in the last 3 months. So I think there's a lot of learnings that, digital, as far as we're concerned, that's the future, and we're investing a lot of money in that now.
Scott,
I think a point I'd make, and it's been interesting. I've had the opportunity to catch up with a lot of the leaders from some of the kind of coffee shop and the restaurant brands in the UK over the last few weeks, and they've all talked about the fact that their businesses and their people are very can-do. They're the types of individuals that will run into a burning building. So focusing on actions and immediate actions has been really easy for them. I think where they're struggling a little bit is to build those longer-term actions and the resilience, I think, linked to those medium-term plans. And it's because we're going to have to think about the vision, the purposes of our businesses, Every single part of the model is going to need to be pressure tested, whether it's assumptions about the customer, supply chains, routes to market, operational procedures, the employment model, a lot of the areas we've talked about in the report. It's going to need, I think, robust planning, but also humility. And I think what I'm seeing now from the leaders I'm speaking to is they acknowledge that they're going to have to reach out when they don't have all the answers. So I think there is a role to play to bringing kind of independent governance and support to help you through the medium term.
Well said. And Scott, maybe finishing off on that point.
Yeah, the governance piece is hugely important. The value proposition, I've always banged the drum on customer value proposition. Dev's touching on employee or team member value proposition. So we've got to be aware of these things. David's idea on investment in terms of things have changed. So what can we do? But if you look at that as well, digital in a very simple term means technology, not people. So we're going to have some stress going forward. Food service, coming back to your very or the original part of your question, restaurants, can we get to 50%? If I look at the restaurants in London that I go to, two of my favorites, River Cafe and Zuma, I go for experience. I go for the buzz, I go for the noise, I go for the banter.
Yeah.
I can probably cook nearly as well as they can. But hey, I like going and spending my, £15.50 for all the noise. And if I can't do that, then I won't go. But what that means is I will either cook more at home or, I'll be buying unique things from David or wherever they are. But the experience, the governance, the governance, the value proposition is huge. And I think in convenience, many people haven't really thought about that because they've been too busy, making hay while the sun shines. Dev's point's a very good one. We really need to start thinking about that governance now.
Well, perhaps on that point, we could also bring in the broader digital economy. So I suppose just, again, some good points in your report, we're, as a sector, we're playing in the digital space and, massively accelerating because of all this. At the same time, the community is really valuing high street retail because of the role it's played, because I think Frontline has been outstanding, incredible, everywhere in the world that we talk to. Hats off. The community have noticed. You talked a little bit about a level playing field in the digital economy. And Scott, I don't know if you want to come back on that one to say, where you see governance going in that respect, because I think there's some interesting changes perhaps coming down the line.
Yeah, I mean, the digital does allow people to become level, and we saw that anyway with the major delivery people with, dark kitchens, etc. You're leveling it up. David has fantastic products in David's kitchen. You could reach a massive audience using digital. Whereas, with 4 stores, if you keep it to where it was before. But that takes time, that takes effort. You've got to make sure you are aligned with current legislation. You've got to make sure that, people are very comfortable with that. And you take your team with you because, the last thing we want is people who've worked damn hard, who've been making themselves available at all the time to suddenly think, ooh, am I going to be, disintermediated by an app? So these are all things that we need to look at, but the opportunity for a level playing field, David and his colleagues in IROF put in home delivery in 2 to 3 days. That's pretty amazing, and that becomes a level playing field. So that will come, but for every retailer who's doing that, my instinct tells me there's many who are not. They just expect this to continue when the price war starts, and it won't.
Dan, I think it is a path that, as convenience operators in particular, we need to tread carefully. If you speak to anyone in the restaurant trade, and they'll tell you just how difficult it has been to work with the likes of Just Eat, DoorDash, Uber Eats or Deliveroo. And we mentioned in the report that San Francisco have actually intervened at city level, and they've limited margins to 15%. I mean, typically they were up to 30% for restaurants. Now, I'm hoping that that type of kind of recalibration of the margin model is something that we'll see across the world, because it will mean lower margin businesses like convenience can actually have some skin in the game when it comes to these third-party operators. But for me, I think there's a bigger observation here. I don't think it's about a leveling off. I think it's about accelerating the kind of change in physical retail. But there's no doubt, Dan, that the winner in this new normal has been online, and the loser has been physical retail. Now, we can say that as a broad business change, but it's massive. It changes our world and society. And I think when we re-emerge into half-empty shopping malls, dilapidated main streets across the world, society is going to need to have a conversation about, is this, what does the rebalancing need to look like to enable us to have spaces that add community value?
Oh, very well made point. I'm sure you're right. Let's just look at some of the sort of essential parts of operations that you pull up in the report. Hygiene, safety, product availability. What does good look like? Maybe who'd like to start on that one?
Well, that should be David, I think.
Yeah.
Well, not in any particular order. The biggest issue we've had over the last 12 weeks has been product availability. And it still is, even to this day. In fact, it's actually becoming an even bigger issue, surprisingly. One of my stores emailed me today just showing me a delivery note, and we expect this weekend to be a very busy weekend. They ordered 360 lines, all mainly alcohol lines actually, received 160. I've never seen such poor levels of availability as that for a very long time. So, what we've done in our business is, we've been around a while, we've got a lot of contacts, and we can use our contacts to help with the supply chain. But we've also focused on our local suppliers. And, one of our strategies going forward is we are going to have more local in our business. We had quite a bit already, a lot more than most, but we will have even more going forward because our local suppliers simply haven't let us down in connection with availability. But in terms of hygiene and everything else, we've had to adapt the way we operate, and much of what's written in the report, in fact, pretty much all that's written in the report, we do. And good operators across the country, that's what I'm seeing. But I do think there's a bit of a problem for the bigger operators. They've got people policing the entrances to their stores, and they're quite zealous, perhaps overzealous. And we're seeing some research which is telling us that people don't particularly like this. So, in our situation, we've got local people serving local people. We're not going to shout at people. We're not going to stand at doors with clipboards and that kind of stuff. It's a common sense approach. It's a good neighbour approach. And I think we've got to be careful and not allow those who there's a number of people who are very keen to police these things. In a very, very strict regime. I'm trying to be polite in what I say. I think we all know the kind of person we're talking about. Most people are sensible and will take a common sense approach, as will retailers. And nobody wants any infection. Of course we don't. But I think some retailers need to be very careful in their approach and not disillusion or anger customers.
Well, great points.
Absolutely.
Scott, would you like to come in on those key non-negotiables?
No, they are non-negotiables, but common sense. There was an expression that it's not that common. Well, actually, common sense is really common. and David's being incredibly polite. The curtain twitchers, the lemon suckers, whatever we want to call them, or the naysayers, the people who basically don't want things to change, don't want a little bit of common sense and neighborliness. And so, yeah, are we going to be looking for packaged products? David said he pivoted. Absolutely, for a while we will. Very good food service operators are still very good food service operators. They may just have to package it, present it differently, but that will come back. Most retailers, good retailers around the world that I know, have huge hygiene standards already. So they're going to have them. Bad retailers don't, and they will go. I come back to the piece on social distancing. Retailers are spending a lot of money on that. I understand why. My own personal view is that's going to go away, because it was simply a hook that a government could put out there to get everybody to, you know, go in the same way. I get that. So when I look at hygiene and I look at packaging and I look at good common sense, these are all very important and will benefit convenience retailers if they do that. If we get over rigid as we, the public, start to relax, then yeah, you know, that's when we're going to see some nuisance coming in.
Mm-hmm. Looking at let's look at the product range and revising the offer. Can retailers implement substantial change there in revising their offers, and do they need to? Scott, going back to you on that one.
Well, yes, they can, because they already have done. And, you know, I've seen retailers take out 30–40% of their SKUs, beef up the ones that they've got left. And they may not have been a brand that they're familiar with. David's going for local. If I look at my big Sainsbury's superstore next to me, it's got lots of Italian food service brands on the shelves. It's got lots of different Indian rice brands on the shelf. So people are flexible. But I don't believe we're going to see these huge ranges in the future, because they're not needed. People will tighten up. They need to create space in the store anyway, for shift changes, restocking, hygiene, at the moment, social distancing. So retailers are already doing that. Independent retailers did it overnight. Our national friends took a little longer, but I can see it in their stores now. I'm sure Dev has a view with, you know, the quick service foodies.
I think, Dan, where retailers have achieved just that and made changes very, very quickly, it was necessity that drove that. I don't think in all cases it was planning, and that I think is a change that needs to take place now. We need, as businesses, to have really strong business continuity plans, and it's all linked to that basic thing which we talk about, which is agility. So I almost kind of set it as a series of questions. So do I get visibility of supply chain issues quick enough? Have I got a contingency supply chain that can be turned on quick enough? Can I spot big changes in customer buying behavior quick enough? Can I get the information to my store teams quick enough? And have they got the capacity to make those changes quick enough? We've built those building blocks as we've been, you know, it's almost the analogy I've been using is flying the plane whilst we've been building it. I think what we now have to do is to build real structures in place that help us make those fast changes you talk about. It's unfortunately, it's process that's going to help us going forward, really.
Dan, if I might add one other aspect. For the whole of my life, I've been regimented by a program of every 3 weeks promotion changes. And even in small stores such as ourselves, you're going to have 200 or 300 product price changes, you know, gondole ends change, all that sort of stuff. That's how I was brought up, and unbelievably, that's what we're still doing. So across the country, buying groups and supply chains, this is how they operate. That's the traditional model. I'm beginning to really question this and say, of course we have to offer value for money, but should our time be better spent, management time be better spent, looking at digital platforms, delivery, click and collect, and really the the time we spend on promotions? I'm not, if I had a choice, I suspect I would be looking more towards delivery and digital and much less time on traditional promotions.
Makes sense, Scott?
Oh, absolutely, and it's something I've noticed. I can see in the bigger stores promotions starting to creep in, but excuse me, I go back a couple of years when we all did a Dublin trip, and we were with Thomas Ennis in Merrion Row, and one of the comments from the retailers was, "I can't see any promotions." And he said, "Well, I don't run promotions. I don't need to run promotions. What my customers are looking for is value for money. They're looking for a breakfast or a lunch offer. They're looking for something exciting, a little bit different." So I'm with David on that one. There are reasons why the supply chain have 3 weekly promotions. I think we know what they are. But is that of benefit to the retailer in the new normal? I'm actually going to come out and say no. There is so much management time. We need to be doing digital, curbside pickup. I'm a big fan of scan, pay and go. We need to be doing all of those things, which will include limited promotions. But, tomorrow, I don't think we, the shopper, expects 300 promotions. That's really not what we're looking for.
And as an ex-promotions manager, this is an area close to my heart.
Your fault, Dev.
I think it's what we define promotions as. So I look at activities such as meal deals, stuff that genuinely builds basket size, like linking products that attach to a mission, like food for later. Or actually the great stuff that David was doing around cream teas and stuff. That is the promotional activity that we need to be focusing on. Gondola ends full of the same products that you can pick up at a supermarket at a slightly better price, probably eroding your margin for nothing, if I'm honest. I just don't see the value in it.
Yeah.
On the subject of clarity of communication, then perhaps let's just think about customer. So questions come in on customer communication. Who's doing that well in this different sort of time that with the consumer looking at having a whole different set of concerns, but who's actually communicating to their customers well at the moment, would you say, out there? Anybody like to take that one first?
Well, we've been looking at lots of different feeds, whether it's social media or going out in stores. I think for me, Dan, it's been the operators who cut out the noise. They've just focused on the key messages of safety, social distancing measures and availability. And they've managed to do that really consistently, whether it's through social media and the in-store messages. I also think the strongest stories have been the ones that have been told by store team members and owner-operators. And I've seen some absolutely amazing content that's been centered on community. And these are the stories that have got real heart and real integrity. And that's definitely, for me, been a feature of certainly the first 6 to 10 weeks. I've seen some really fantastic content, sometimes generated by customers as well, actually, associated with stores.
Yeah, and is it something you focused on, David, in your business?
Yeah, very much. I mean, when all this kicked off, I wondered whether we would have our stores open at all. And I'm quite sure a lot of our staff were quite scared to come into work. So we had to really give a reason for being there. And obviously we're a community store, and I felt it was really important that we help our local community through this by supplying them with products. So there was a justification for being open, not a financial one, but we're part of the community. And then we focused initially on trying to reassure our staff. That was really important. We spent a lot of time trying to do that, and because people were genuinely frightened to come into work, and we spent a lot of time telling them what we were doing, asking for suggestions, and implementing them fast. And I think we talk about these perspex screens. We had them up on Monday. So the lockdown the previous week, we had them up on Monday. Supermarkets were doing it 2 weeks after us. The point was staff saw us doing something very quickly. We said we're going to do it, we did it. And then we started telling our customers, all these food safety, the precautions that we were taking. And you would think nobody would be interested in that. You know, it's not exactly interesting, but unbelievable the amount of comments we got back from customers saying, well, fantastic job, well done, we'll be using you, well done for looking after your staff. The amount of goodwill we have generated by simply communicating the steps we have made has been absolutely enormous.
Do you think it's going to become a real point of difference on David's point, Scott and Dev, you know, how you take care of your frontline retail workers and how that relationship is managed? I think this is a big topic. Maybe we can have this as the final topic.
I do, and you know, David said he started with the team members, and that makes sense to me. We mentioned the Northeast USA retailer Wawa in the paper in terms of, you know, how they get people involved. Their strategy is very simple. You look after your team members and then your customers are looked after. So I think it's hugely important. I am encouraged by what David said in terms of talk to people, overcome the level of fear. I am also personally saddened that people have a level of fear, because that fear has come from governments, unfortunately. I don't think it was necessary, but here we are. But retailers overcoming that and getting their people out in the community to do that. In terms of food hygiene, massively important. And where we can demonstrate that, say to people what we're doing, and that maybe translates into more plastic at the moment, but you know, hey, that will disappear. But it's that comfort and that's confidence that allows us all to go shopping. And if the team are not with you, then it will fail. Whereas before we've talked about, well, what's our staff rotation number? Very high. I'd like to think we're all going to talk about what's our staff retention number now, because these people are critical.
And I think this is going to be, Dan, I think this is going to be one of those factors that when we look back on, it will determine who's done really, really well and who's not. I'm already hearing from retailers in certain geographies about a massive increase in union activity. There are lots of shifts, partly because of the age of the workforce. We've got more Gen Zers and millennials now on the front line, and they have a very, very different attitude towards work, communication and purpose than their predecessors. I don't think this is an area that as an industry we've focused enough on, and it will be a massive risk for us if we don't. So you know, there are further factors to this. Obviously, employment levels in the new normal are going to be stretched and tested because of the financial constraints that economies will be under, and people will be looking to retain their jobs. But making our team members feel valued, giving them a voice, helping them absolutely improve businesses, because they're going to be, you know, I think there was a study done, 70% of the value of ideas tends to come from the front line. You know, people that really look after their team members and embrace co-working and partnership style models, I think will be the ones that absolutely succeed in the new normal. And there'll be some casualties, I think, on the other end of this as well.
Great. Final thoughts, Scott?
Well, actually, I tell you what, I'm going to pass to David, because I think a retailer should have the final thoughts rather than me.
Well, I think that talking about our team is really important, and you know, I think it's been good that there has been some recognition that the people who work in food stores are very much the key workers, and I think that's been encouraging. And you know, I've been listening to teachers talk, you know, being slightly reluctant to go back to work, And you know, it does occur to me that those same teachers come into our stores, you know, fairly regularly, and are served by people who've been working right through this period. So, you know, you know, our business wouldn't exist if we didn't have a strong team. And you know, I've been brought up in a family business, and it was instilled in me from day one that you treat people in your business like your family. And that sometimes means you've got to speak fairly sharply to them. It's not all warm and cuddly, but you know, people eventually realize that, you know, you're a good employer. And we get countless testimonials from people. You know, we don't have a big staff turnover number, and we never have. We don't, you know, that's just something that's not discussed in our business because it's simply not an issue. And it's just about treating people sensibly. It's back to this common sense, Dan, that it's not just about money. It's about respect. It's about thanking people when they've done a great job. And colleagues have done a fantastic job in the last two or 3 months.
Terrific. I think terrific way to end the discussion. We could talk longer. We've had 45 minutes, and we like to keep it to schedule. I just really remains for me to congratulate you on all the work that I know you all three did on this report. I think it's a terrific read. I'd recommend anybody reading it. It's on Global C-Store Focus as a download if you'd like to look at it, if you haven't already looked at it. Thanks to the audience for tuning in. And, you know, I'll talk a little bit about what's coming next on Global C-Store Focus. But before I do, I'd just like to thank you, Scott, David and Dev for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Great. Well, as I said, a terrific discussion with today's panel, Scott, David and Dev. I think, you know, really sort of set the scene for medium-term strategy for our industry. Just a little word on what else is coming up with Global C-Store Focus. We did publish today an exclusive interview on Global C-Store Focus with Ilyas Munshi, who's commercial director at Eurogarage's, EG Group. I think there's an interesting read. We'll follow up on many of the points we just had in the discussion. So worth looking at that. We've also next week got another interview with Richard Young, CEO at Circle K Hong Kong. And again, I think one of the key lessons for our industry here is to learn from those countries who are, if you like, experiencing this a little bit further down the line than us. And Richard is a terrific retailer, but he's also been incredibly generous with his time to share some of his learnings from the Hong Kong market. And let's face it, if Hong Kong can manage this, then we can, if you think about the urban densities that they have. So some good stories coming to you if they're not already online in Global C-Store Focus. We won't be doing a Shop Talk Live next Friday. We've got a week off. We'll be back the following week, and look forward to tuning in and hearing from you then. Thanks very much. Good afternoon.